Good morning on this lovely Southern California sunny Sunday morning.
For you.
Repetition for you. Yeah. This is Heretical Weekends, number 10. I titled this one Fucked Up Bible Stories Revisited because it was inspired by something that our friend Gavagai had an update on a previous episode. So we will touch upon that. Of course, we got Fox in the Know, who managed to crawl out of bed and join us today. And Turtle, of course. Glad he could make it. I love your icon, by the way, Turtle. I'm desperately trying to figure out what game that's from.
Well, good luck.
It is from a game, right?
It is. It is.
Well, that's good.
Would you like me to tell you? I can tell you.
Sure.
No, I think it should be like a little Easter egg that goes with that.
I will Easter egg, and it's all good.
Shut down.
We got a lot to talk about. I think we're going to touch upon that Bible story. I think we're going to touch upon Trey. That sounds perverted, I know, but Trey likes it. And there was a bit of an Arcane Logos exchange I had in the comments that I had to touch upon. And as always, fuck you, Arcane Logos. And whatever else comes to, whatever else we feel like talking about. So, Gabby, you had the one real request this week for a topic. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, well, so I came across a video. It was like a series "Who's Who in the Bible" by Pantheon Studios, was the YouTube channel, and it was talking about the woman Dinah in the book of Genesis, and the apologist that created the video basically indicated that the woman in the story is raped, and that's how the story goes, and that Yahweh essentially led them through what he called a reasonable resolution, or something along those lines. Anyhow, and I would contend that it's probably not reasonable, but we can take a look at that if you guys are ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I can speak for all of us when it comes to biblical rape. We're all ready.
All right, so here we go. Heretical Weekends presents Flipped Up Bible Stories.
So I got to mute myself because I'm going to crack up this whole thing. It's going to make my icon show.
The rape of Dinah, and so this again comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 34. And just for very brief background, the patriarchs of Judaism are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and this is specifically talking about Jacob and his sons, and their kind of extended families. And Jacob, if you read chapters, the chapters before this, 32 and 33, it talks about how he's been in constant conflict with anybody anywhere he goes. I mean, he tricked his brother Esau. He had to go flee from the land where Esau was because he got Esau so mad. He tricked Esau out of his birthright, yeah, and also tricked his father into giving him his blessing. So he's just really kind of a dishonest and greedy person who is after whatever he can get his hands on. He settles in a land with his uncle Laban and gets Laban pissed off and things. So now he's just kind of moving all over the place, and he's collecting wives as he goes. He was given one wife, and she wasn't the attractive one, so he got her sister. It's just a beautiful story. So we begin this one day. The daughter of Jacob and his wife Leah went to visit some of the young women who lived in the area, but the local prince Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, saw Dinah. He seized her and he raped her. But then he fell in love with her. And he tried to win her affection with tender words. He said to his father, Hamor, "Get me this girl. I want to marry her." So Jacob soon Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah, but since his sons were out in the field herding his livestock, he said nothing until they returned. Hamor, Shechem's father, came to discuss the matter with Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons had come home from the field as soon as they heard what had happened. They were shocked and furious that their sister had been raped. Okay, reasonable reaction. Shechem had done a disgraceful thing against Jacob's family, something that should never be done. I think that is probably the sternest kind of rebuke of the act of rape in the entire Bible, right there in that verse. Something that should never be done, because it's done in other places, and nobody seems to bat an eyelash about it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What if the reason that they're shocked and appalled by the rape isn't because it's their sister necessarily, but because women are viewed much more like property or livestock, in a sense that, you know, like...
That was my thought, too.
Yeah,
like and I think that does play into it for sure.
Like, break out that 50 shekels.
Right. So yeah, I think that's definitely a valid point. So even go ahead.
Christians, I think, would definitely try and view this as, oh, it's the woman, you know, they're concerned about the woman, but I kind of have a little skepticism about that. Right.
Well, and when you look at other places in the Bible, that view is not held consistently. If you could even argue that it's evident here,
right.
And given the Bible as a whole, I think that view is not accurate. So on we go. Hamor tries to speak with Jacob and his sons. "My son Shechem is truly in love with your daughter," he said. "Please let him marry her. In fact, let's arrange other marriages too. You give us your daughters for our sons, and we'll give you our daughters for your sons. And you may live among us. The land is open to you. Settle here and trade with us. Feel free to buy property in the area." Then Shechem himself spoke to Dinah's father and brothers. "Please be kind to me. Let me marry her," he begged. "I will give you whatever you ask. No matter what dowry or gift you demand, I'll gladly pay it. Just give me the girl as my wife." So
Give me the girl.
Maybe he shouldn't have been so quick to rape.
Well, mistakes were made.
Right.
Well, has anybody considered the fact that no one has... All these men are talking about the women as for marrying and stuff, but no one's actually asked the woman or got the girl's opinion at all?
Yeah. Oh, that doesn't really matter.
I overlooked that, my bad.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. So, here is kind of the resolution that this apologist has kind of given a stamp of approval on. Since Shechem had defiled their sister Dinah, Jacob's sons responded deceitfully to Shechem and his father, Hamor. They said to them, "Well, we couldn't possibly allow this because you're not circumcised. You haven't cut off the ends of your penis. So it would be a disgrace for our sister to marry a man like you."
Oh yeah, that's the problem.
"But here is a solution. Every man among you will be circumcised like we are. Then we will give our daughters, and we'll take your daughters for ourselves. We will live among you and become one people. But if you don't agree to be circumcised, we will take her and be on our way."
There's nothing more? Is that the end of the
story? No, that's not the end.
It gets better.
But I like that all of the other men who had nothing to do with this also have to be circumcised for some reason.
Right. Yeah, and there's a whole lot of that going on in the Bible in general. Just that one person does something bad, and a whole community of people are punished or whatever. So Hamor and his son Shechem agreed to the proposal. Shechem wasted no time in acting on this request, for he wanted Jacob's daughter desperately. All in all, it seems like I don't know. I mean, maybe his motivation is totally just to bang her a bunch of times or whatever. But anyways, he does seem like he's actually interested in her. Anyhow, Shechem was a highly respected member of his family, and he went with his father Hamor to present the proposal to the leaders at the town gate. "These men are our friends," they said. "Let's invite them to live here among us and trade freely." This is such a repetitive thing. How many times have they repeated? Everybody will live among each other, and we'll share their wives, and you'll share our wives, and Yeah. I don't know. But anyhow, look, the land is large enough to hold them. We can take their daughters as wives and let them marry ours. But they will consider staying here and becoming one people with us only if all of our men are circumcised, just as they are.
So what happens if there's like one holdout? Like one guy's like,
yeah, that's
nope,
a good question.
Nope, not doing it.
His penis is just the way that Yahweh made it when he was born.
Unacceptable.
An unhealthy obsession with the shape of other men's penises.
So if we do this, all their livestock and possessions will eventually be ours. Come, let's agree to their terms and let them settle here among us. Penis surgeries can make you vulnerable. So all the men in the town council agreed with Hamor and Shechem, and every male in the town was circumcised. But 3 days later, when their wounds were still sore, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, who were Dinah's full brothers, took their swords and entered the town without opposition. They slaughtered every male there, including Hamor and his son Shechem. They killed them with their swords, then took Dinah from Shechem's house and returned to their camp. So they had actually given their daughter then.
That's so horrible. Wow.
No, the Turtle. This is a reasonable and measured intervention.
I watched the video of the guy he didn't mention this part of it. Wow, that's a great twist to that story. Wow, that is a fucked up Bible story.
It's good to know that you can make a deal, lie, then slaughter everybody afterwards, even people that had nothing to do with anything.
Wow.
Yeah, and these are the good guys, right?
But I am still very surprised because the video that guy made it sound like they all lived happily ever after. I don't know that I've ever heard this story before, but wow.
Yeah. Well, some of them lived happily ever after.
It's even if he ended the story right there before this part, I don't consider Bob down the street who had nothing to do with anything having to get the end of his dick chopped off. He's like, well, what? I didn't do anything, and so it's not a happy ending for that guy.
No, but compared to this, it was.
Oh well, yeah. Well, compared to him being slaughtered in his sleep, yes.
Your scrotums hang too low. Oh my. Alright. So what happens next? Meanwhile, the rest of Jacob's sons arrived. So only 2 of them. That's pretty impressive, I guess, to go into a camp and slaughter all the men.
That doesn't sound made up at all.
Now the rest of them show up. Now that all the slaughtering is done. Finding the men slaughtered, they plundered the town because their sister had been defiled there. Reasonable. They seized all of the flocks and herds and donkeys, everything they could lay their hands on, both inside the town and outside in the fields. They looted all the wealth, plundered their houses, and they also took the little children and wives and led them away as captives.
Huh. That is a nice story.
Yeah.
That's fun for the whole family.
Afterward, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have ruined me. You've made me stink among all the people of this land, among all the Canaanites and Perizzites. We are so few that they will join forces and crush us. I will be ruined, and my entire household will be wiped out. But why should we let him treat our sister like a prostitute? They retorted angrily. And that's the end of the chapter.
What?
That's the end of the story, really. You know, so then the next chapter, just so you get an idea of how this proceeds from there. Yeah, so Genesis 35 begins. Then God said to Jacob, "Get ready and move to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." So Jacob told everyone in his household, "Get rid of all your pagan idols, purify yourselves, put on clean clothing. We are now going to Bethel, where I will build an altar to the God who answered my prayers when I was in distress. He has been with me wherever I have gone." So he's running away. Yahweh doesn't seem to care about what they did.
I love that they have pagan idols, though. I love that the people in his household have pagan idols.
Just a few.
Like, what? Like, these are your people, God. And they still have pagan idols for some reason.
Yeah. What are you going to do?
It kind of feels like, I'm going on a hunch here, but it kind of looked like a chapter or two got left out. Do you know what I mean? Like, after the first one, like, who ends a chapter in the middle of a conversation?
Yahweh.
Oh, okay. Well,
I guess that was the point. Like, yeah, they shouldn't treat us like prostitutes. Well, all right then.
We should kill them all and steal all their junk.
So I didn't get a chance to watch the video. So the guy in the video is saying, what did he say exactly?
Here, I'll tell you what. Why don't we? Would it be okay to watch it? It's just a minute long. I'm gonna post it in the side chat. I don't have the setup to play it through my speakers. Would you be able to do that, Heathen?
Yes, but I tend to suck at these sort of things.
No, you did good last week.
Did I really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it came out good. I've never been able to play video in a Hangout very well.
I always get all paranoid because with screen sharing, because these crazy motherfuckers out there
flagging stuff.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like you're.
We declare that it's fair use, I think, and then it's okay.
Everyone. How's that?
That's it.
Yay me. Okay. Let's size this up. Let's go.
Another great character in Who's Who in the Bible that maybe readers may not be familiar with is Dinah. Now, Dinah is the lovely daughter of Jacob and Leah, who unfortunately was raped by Shechem, the son of a powerful king named Hamor. Now, this is a modern story we're all familiar with. Here's this very powerful individual, this local celebrity, who abuses a young girl just because he thinks he can, because he's invulnerable, because he's above the law. And of course he isn't, because what happens next is he falls in love with Dinah. He's filled with remorse and asks his father, the king, to plead with Jacob to allow him to marry her. And Dinah agrees. And even when Jacob says, all right, but on one condition, that all of you, all your people, the local population, are all circumcised, even then they say yes and allow themselves to be circumcised, even though I don't think surgical procedures in the Bronze Age were all that well developed. What is important, of course, is that this shameful deed is rectified in the end, that Dinah and Shechem marry and ultimately try to get something positive out of this horrific deed.
That's a little different, isn't it?
Yeah, he kind of skipped a part there.
He also said that Dinah agreed, but it never explicitly says
anything about what she thinks.
No.
Wow, that was a spin like I've never seen.
Yeah, just don't read the passage in the Bible. Take my word for it. Everything worked out all right. everybody's happy in the end, and they really got something positive out of it. It was kind of crummy situation, to begin with, but
they got a positive out of this rape thing. They probably excluded the fact that if they did circumcise all those guys, at least 2/3 of them probably would have died from infection.
Yeah. Yeah, you wonder how many of the ancient Hebrews that were circumcised died from infection.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I kind of, is this guy on all the time? Does he have multiple videos? Because I'd love to, do a...
We could just do a series on his videos.
Exactly. Exactly. We can just pick it apart, and then or actually go to the story itself, like we were doing.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's the only one of his videos that I've seen. I just came across it, and I was like, hang on, that's not exactly how that story goes.
What a freaking nut job that guy is.
Yeah, even ignoring the last part, like you said, mischievous. I mean, it's such a spin to try and make it sound like it would have been a happy ending anyway, even without the actual ending there, just where everybody agrees to be circumcised. Does anybody really believe that would actually happen in real life? It's ridiculous to take that story at face value, but
people do. And,
yeah, they do because they don't think about it. But
and then the best part is they'll claim it's like historical fact.
Yeah, look at people still get circumcised today, so therefore it's true.
Well, my girlfriend appreciates my circumcision, so.
Well, you can thank Shechem for raping.
I can thank Shechem. I want to meet, like you said, the guy that's down the street. I goes, yeah, I'm not really cool with this circumcision thing. I mean, do I really have to go through with this? But the way he made it, the way he made it sound like when the offer or whatever of circumcision was on the table for the whole town, it was like this great love that ended up blossoming out of it. Everyone was on board. You know what I mean?
Well, just think of all the daughters that you can get from the Israelites.
I would have been like, fuck Shechem. Fuck Shechem and his penis. Oh, man, that's great. Well, I mean, speaking of which, and I'm going to segue a little bit here, do you, Gabby, you mentioned that your, I don't know what you want to call it, adventures in Bible studies, it's come to an end?
Yeah, well, I had that faith Bible study with some people here locally in real life, and it was a 4-part series, and we kind of went through the last bit of it, not last Tuesday, but the week before that Tuesday. So
are you converted?
No. And I don't know if I changed anyone's mind there either, but a couple things came out of it. One, I think that it was good for that group of guys to be exposed to someone who is not super angry and hateful and completely ridiculous in his disbelief. And I think there are plenty of atheists out there that kind of fit that description. They're there and they're so confrontational and things. I was measured and I think hopefully thoughtful in my questions and in my responses to their questions. And I think it's good for just people to be exposed to opinions that they don't normally get in their normal social circles.
Do you guys talk about these kind of Bible stories? I mean, how do you have a Bible study? I mean, what do you guys study exactly?
Well, I mean, it was intended to be a look at what the Bible talks about when it talks about faith. Faith was kind of the overarching theme, and we discussed kind of the biblical definition. Keith, the guy that kind of led the thing, I've referred to him as Keith when I'm talking about it here. Yeah, it was his contention that faith is really a gift from God, and there's biblical support for saying that, and that, what did he say? I mean, basically, it was kind of special pleading, because, you know, I would say, well, look, you know, all of these other religions say you have to have faith to, you know, believe in these things, and it seems like you get to that point where someone says, okay, well, you have to have faith when you reach the end of things that, you know, don't really qualify as good evidence. And so in order to get beyond that lack of evidence, you have to go to this faith step. And Keith was saying, well, our faith comes from Yahweh. Well, you know, our faith is special because it's the real faith.
Right.
All of these other religions, they all think that their faith is the real faith. There is the special faith, that's the magic faith that can be counted on. So, you know, and I don't know if I was able to at least provoke any kind of doubt or skepticism toward that point, but I did my best and made my case. And then, you know, one of the things that the final installment was kind of left to me. You know, Keith, I think he had something planned and then kind of wadded it up, so to speak, and said, because I'd asked him on the second to the last, the penultimate Bible study session, I said, well, what's the last session going to be about? And he said, the last session is, and he was kind of looking at his notes, last session is for you, and you decide what you want to talk about, David, or Gabagai. And so what I did, I came in there and I said, well, I'd like to talk about, you know, whether or not faith is a legitimate way to know anything, and I tried to just kind of hammer away on the idea that faith is not a reliable way to come to know things. And
so, did you talk about the Bible in that session, or? 'Cause I mean...
Yeah, well, we talked about, and I also had I opened a Facebook group for these guys specifically to kind of have ongoing discussions during the week, and that's kind of died away. But we had some good back and forth, and it's probably, I think the intensity increased when it's online. I think there was more, I don't want to say vitriol, but definitely more kind of emotion from in the exchanges there than there was when we're sitting down face to face in real life.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably a common thing.
A little bit less polite online, probably.
Yeah. So
do you think Trey Jadlow was polite in real life?
I think he can be more polite and less, well, depending on his mood, I think. But I think in general, when people are in hangouts and things, that they can be dickhead. I don't know. Yeah, but I think the degree to which you have kind of removed the personal element of things. So, like in comment threads, I think people tend to be more dickheads, I guess, for lack of a better term, and then step down from there to the hangouts where you're actually having a conversation with people in real time, and then probably when you're sitting face to face in real life, sitting down with people, I think it's less so there. So at least that's my intuition on it, and I don't have hard data to back that up, but
no, I think that sounds pretty accurate.
Are you making a knowledge claim?
Making a claim from anecdote.
It's something that I learned when I was in college. It's that sociological aspect of like road rages are a great example. You know, there are plenty of people that will, you know, yell and scream, "Look at this asshole in front of me! They're not driving fast enough." But they know that when they get out of the car, they're not going to go and yell at somebody like that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
The car itself provides some sort of psychological like protection. You know what I mean? Like they're in a bubble.
It's a barrier.
Yeah. It's that barrier. You know, and I think, you know, especially with the internet, people are thousands of miles away, I mean, you will shoot off at the mouth, like it's nothing. But I mean, the fundies that are on YouTube, I can't think of a situation where I would actually speak to them in real life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if Hogtie's watching, but I briefly watched Hogtie versus G-Man.
Oh my god.
I'm not sure if anybody actually saw it.
Horrendous. Poor guy. I mean,
I need to go back and watch it.
So it was typical G-Man. Okay, this is. I mean, I don't know G-Man, but my inclination is that he should not procreate, or if he does, anymore. And he's like a retarded person. I mean, I know that's not politically correct to say, but he's retarded. I mean, like he has very low comprehension and probably very low IQ, right? His ability or inability to understand things is astounding. I feel like I would have a better conversation talking to my remote control or possibly, a cup. I mean, so when people talk to G-Man, they're just like, especially someone like who's a real smart guy, as far as I can tell, and I don't know if G-Man like wears people down with like challenges and stuff, but I sit there and I go, if I saw G-Man in real life, I may, like let's say he lived in my apartment building, I'd be nice to the guy, but I wouldn't get into a conversation with him about this because he's retarded. I mean, he's remedial. He would be the guy in school that went to the special class because he couldn't keep up. You know what I mean? That's just my take. I mean, I don't know G-Man. Maybe he could be a fucking genius for all I know. But from what I see of it,
well. I don't think he's a genius.
No.
He just does not understand. His comprehension is what gets me. And people make the comment that, well, he doesn't really listen, and he just waits for his chance to speak and this and that. And that may be partially true or whatever. I don't know. But I'm talking about just from a global aspect of my knowledge of G-Man and his hangouts. Even when people sit down and explain something to him, and not even in great detail because his attention span is that of a goldfish, but enough to where, like, maybe, my dog or would understand, like something I don't know how you could not get this, and he's just like, and just like, let me ask you a question, and he just,
I get the sense with G-Man, and I haven't watched a whole lot of G-Man, but I get the sense that he doesn't think that anything that you say actually matters. Like, he's almost like a presuppositionalist in the way he behaves, just because if you don't believe what he believes, you're ultimately wrong anyway. So even if you make a point or whatever, he can immediately discount it in his own head just because it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, he has no doubt. That's the problem with G-Man. He has no... I mean, an honest person, an intelligent person has doubt, and it's a very important tool to have because it pushes you to try to articulate better positions and better arguments. But G-Man has no doubt whatsoever in his mind that the Bible is true, Christianity is true, that God exists, that Jesus existed and still exists, and all of that. And he is a narcissist, and he thinks he is a chosen representative on YouTube, on this platform, that God wants him to do what he's doing. And there is something quite tragic about the guy. He is so stupid that he has deluded himself into thinking that he is a reputable apologist. I mean, that was one of the things that came in that hangout. He called himself an apologist. He thinks he is an actual... I mean, Jesus, I mean, if he is what apologetics has come to, then, I mean, Christianity might as well just pack it in now. The guy is... he has been fed. I mean, from my observations of watching him on and off, I mean, I can't watch him for too long because he's just too irritating and just too obnoxious. But he's been fed from this kind of joke character who, was someone fun to beat up on in Hangouts and get him on, and have him come out with what nonsense is he going to come out today, and that's all happened. But this is fed into this monster that now actually does seriously think he is a person of a reputable apologist within the community, and everything is just showered in ego. The guy is so egotistical, and I mean, Hogtie he's probably one of the best interlocutors you're going to get for atheism, because he's knowledgeable, but he's also really like polite to people and gives them a lot of time. And he lost his temper with G-Man because G-Man was just such an asshole. There was this question that he kept asking him, but G-Man said he knew the answer, but he wasn't going to reveal it until the 26th of May.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you don't know the answer, but you can't admit you don't know the answer. You're so disingenuous that you're going to... And the arrogance just drips from his voice these days. And the fun guy, I think, that maybe a few apologists, not a few apologists, a few other atheists maybe liked, a year and a half ago. That guy's gone. That guy's dead. And there is just this monster now that our community has kind of partly created, I guess. And, it's just like, for me, just ignore the guy and just treat him as a retard and just leave him be, and hopefully he'll just wilt away and die, because he needs the drama. He needs his ego to be fed. And I posted but they do. But I think there is love and hate for someone like G-Man, and it's tipped firmly into the balance of people now really start to just dislike the guy. He's just so dishonest. He's just so disingenuous. You just, you hear a lot of people say, well, you can have G-Man in a hangout and he'll be a really nice guy to talk to until you start talking about Christianity, and then he'll just go bonkers and people will be like, oh, okay, I'm just G-Man. But I think there has been a shift, and there's this, the channels and all of these different G-Man versus the world and all that kind of stuff, and he gets invited on the Drunken Peasant, and he thinks he's a bit of a celebrity. I think he really does think he's achieving something, but it's like watching animals at the zoo. I mean, you just go and watch. It's just a morbid fascination with the guy. It isn't a belief that he's doing anything.
Television.
Yeah.
I have to agree with Fox that it is absolutely pointless to engage with him, and there's nothing good come out of it. It's just entertainment.
Yeah, but that's value, right? You get entertainment.
I'm not condemning anyone who wants to do that.
I don't, but I think
other than that, there's nothing else in there.
Oh yeah, no, there's nothing of virtue or substance there at all, for sure.
I don't even find it entertaining. I can't even listen to the guy for more than if Hogtie wasn't on there, I wouldn't be able to listen. Because
that's the only reason why I listen to it, because usually you'll see someone who's got a skill at talking to apologists and fundamentalists and getting something out of them and creating a dialogue with them where it's actually quite revealing. And he was trying to do that, and he's done that with quite a range of people, and he just couldn't do it with G-Man. G-Man he's too far gone. You don't get a straight answer out of him. He never answers a question. He just, and this whole he seriously thinks his arguments on slavery are some kind of. And he kept saying, Matt Dillahunty, you are next, sir, you are next, sir. Referencing, calling him out constantly. Like, Matt Dillahunty's going around the world, going to conferences and things like that. You really think he's going to waste his time talking to you?
Yeah,
you
really.
are not even... I mean, we can have people who are absolute arseholes and people who we can disagree with completely, but we can still talk to them, Matt Bell. We can still have that dialogue there. And even if you're a disingenuous twat who's rude and awful to people, but you actually put something out there which is cogent, and we can go, oh, okay, this is why I think this is wrong, and then you'll hear his invective and he'll spew a lot of, horrific, arrogant bullshit. But G-Man's this kind of perfect combination of someone who's unlikable, self-deceptive, generally quite deceptive, incredibly stupid, beyond words stupid, and ridiculously narcissistic. So there's no conversation out there. It's really now very slim pickings to even get something funny out of what the guy says. I mean, occasionally he'll come out with something which you'll just think, oh god.
Yeah,
he did it in one of that where I'm trying to remember what he said. Something about like you're trying to goat me. That's what he said to Hogtie. You're trying to goat me, as in instead of God. You're trying to goat me, and then I think Hogtie slipped in like a joker with another animal reference in there that just completely went over his head, and he kept repeating it. You're not trying to goat me. You're trying to goat me. And I was just, oh my god. I mean, come on, seriously.
That was that's
goat would make more sense.
Arcane's two quote fallacy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's in the same bracket as people like Arcane and
G-Man is kind of like if the fundies on YouTube were circus performers, G-Man is the elephant man that you see in the cage that you just kind of look at and you're really just waiting for him to like shit his pants and drool on himself, because that's pretty much all the substance you're gonna get. He's a sideshow. You know what I mean? He's a sideshow attraction when it comes to speaking as far as fundamentalists go.
Yeah, but I have to say that if his goal is to get attention, then he is winning, of course. I mean, even Matt Dillon had responded to him. That was pretty good.
Yeah, and he goes on the Drunken Peasants. I mean, those guys are pretty huge, and a lot of people watch them. So he's become a renowned figure, but not for anything remotely positive.
No.
I mean, which is probably, I don't know, is probably a good thing, because I mean, if you sit at the other side of the fence, then you think, well, that guy is just like the perfect, as if it's like the Manchurian Candidate or something. It just programmed him to go in there and just cause havoc and make theism look as bad as it is. But this is the problem: is I don't actually want it. I don't get any benefit really from theism being a joke, because I think actually the best way of coming to some kind of agreement with people is if they have a rational position and you can kind of hammer it out. But if G-Man is the future, then Jesus Christ, we're in trouble.
I don't think G-Man's the future.
No.
I'd like to make a note to anyone that is watching that thinks that we're just a bunch of shit talkers. Fox made a Manchurian Candidate reference, so F you guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we all pretty much agree G-Man is a waste of time, but people have him on for whatever reason, whether it be attention or his, infamy or whatever the case may be. He doesn't get it. He's not smart enough to get that he's on Drunken Peasants so they can laugh at him. Did anybody see the Drunken Peasants where Cult of Dusty was on with G-Man? And Cult of Dusty, I don't think he had ever met him at that point or seen any of his videos, and he was, I mean, and I'm not a big Cult of Dusty guy, but he was like, he thought he was being punked for a second. Like he couldn't believe that G-Man was a real person. You know what I mean? Like, there was that second where he's like, "Come on, man, why are you doing this to me?"
Yeah, I saw that, and it did take him a little while to even accept that G-Man was real. I think he even asked that, like, "Is this guy for real?" And they're like, "Oh no, he's for real."
Yeah,
this is G-Man.
So he's such a caricature. But speaking of caricatures, because we can spend all day on G-Man, Arcane Logos and Fox and JD Kane had a little back and forth going. Do you remember that, Fox?
Yeah, sure, bro. Yeah, I know that, bro.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, bro. What's up, bro? Yeah. Yes. Inane Logos is someone who I have posed a challenge to repeatedly to try to get him to realise the complete folly of his position, because he does the standard cyclone, very primitive precept nonsense where they love to invoke skeptical arguments as being something which is such a huge, devastating problem for atheists, on people who are not Christian, as if we can't also create a devastating hypothetical scenario which would destroy the thing that he thinks gets him out of the problem. So it just comes down to blatant question begging, and he dodged and dodged and dodged this for a long time. So I think he instinctively realised that actually it was something he couldn't overcome easily. And then he actually had a really ham-fisted attempt of actually answering it. I can't remember what his actual responses were, but they were just so easy to just push back and go, no, that does not answer the challenge. It doesn't answer how you get out of the problem. And he knows he can't get out of it, but he will never admit that. Instead, he will just say, well, you can't even know anything. You've got no claim to knowledge, and all of that nonsense that comes along with it. I mean, if he was someone who wanted an actual discussion about epistemology, if he was serious about that, then you could have that conversation, and that would be fine. But he's not. He's not interested in that. He does the classic precept thing of taking the high ground and assuming he's got all the answers, but actually he hasn't got anything. In fact, he's in a worse position than everyone else, which is because he believes, because a book says so, that someone out there, some being out there, solves all of these problems. It is basically a giant philosophical get out of jail free card that doesn't actually exist, and so he's left with nothing. And I just wish he could accept that, because then he could realize where people are coming from, why we all believe he's talking absolute nonsense. But again, he's another example of someone who isn't particularly bright, although he's not as stupid as G-Man, but will take this contrary position. He'll be the contrarian. So he'll always have a seat, or for a long time he always had a seat on Hangouts. He was always someone who people would address videos to and challenges to. And actually, it made him, in his head, I think, for his own ego, feel as if he had parity with people like Ozzy and all the others that have challenged him. And it's this get clever quick scheme that people like him use. They buy this terrible argument, which is basically just the equivalent of saying, "I know you are, you said you are, so what am I?" That's what it is. That kind of childish playground argument, where everything you try rationally to build a bridge towards him, he just knocks the bridge down and goes, "No, no, no," and then it's
no bridge.
There isn't. And so he is just an incredibly disingenuous person, and he blocks people and unblocks them at will, and he will not. He's not an honest. He's not someone who has an ounce of honesty about him, and he's just. I mean, personally, he's not particularly rude or insulting. He's not the worst guy ever out there, but his position is just so vapid and so empty, and he knows. I think he knows he hasn't got anything there, and he's kind of like he's living on the edge now of even the faintest ember of credibility, because he's boxed himself into so many different holes, and every time he pops out of the woodwork, people go, "Hey, how's that? How are you going on answering that question that I asked a few weeks ago?" That kind of ruins your position, and then he doesn't give a response. So yeah, he's just this kind of. He almost is like a ghost now, just rattling around, shaking the chains, and we're all like, "Oh, okay,"
Well, it's in his name. It is the ghost, but
he is the ghost.
I kind of wanted to run through how many times we actually try to get him to answer this question.
Maybe you could be Arcane. You could do his voice. You could. I like that.
Drop a few IQ points and over. No, but you I just want to kind of go through this here for those of you guys that haven't seen it and anyone watching. But Arcane entered the conversation.
With Trey Dadlow.
Yeah,
Trey Dadlow looked like he was intelligent.
Right. I mean, I posed a question. I mentioned it up here saying Trey Jadlow caught the same strain of Dunning-Kruger that Arcane Logos has. But I don't. And I said, but seriously, I don't think I have heard anyone agree with Trey's argument ever. So his typical response, as always, is, did you accidentally evolve monkey brain tell you that? So, which is pretty typical, right? I mean, if he's gonna enter into a back and forth with somebody, that's kind of his go-to. Because if he isn't going to talk to you, if he's refusing to talk to you, he'll just put troll or lol and then not respond anymore. It's so typical. So anyway, so I'm just going to go through here real quick and skip the stuff and try to get the key points to Fox trying to get an answer out of him. So we got back and forth with Trey. I love this quote from Arcane. He says to Fox, "You fools love written debates because you can play word games without being pressed on issues. It's not that easy to be a snake when someone can critique your claims in real time. You are not fooling anyone." Isn't it great that when a pre-supper says someone else playing word games,
you've won then, don't you? That they've just like, that's it. There's no going back from that.
So Fox, you respond. I'm going to skip this part because it's something else. But it says, "Did you even read what you posted? Of course, I am still waiting for you to answer the challenge. I posted half a dozen times. If you think you'd do better answering in a hangout, I'd be willing to entertain one." And then Arcane says, "By all means, my furry little friend." Great, you say. We do a show every other Sunday, so next week, where the first topic is where the first topic and perhaps last, if you attempt to dodge it, will be how your precept gets away with the challenge question. And he says, sure, now what's the challenge question? And then you go and you repeat it, because I'm sure this is a copy and paste by now, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm not typing that out.
Did you want to recap this real quick?
Well, I can't really see there, but the gist of it is basically construct a skeptical scenario where, I mean, Arcane's entire answer to how he knows things for certain is because it's a being with absolute knowledge has revealed it to him in such a way that he knows it to be true. So my whole argument was well, you know, it is essentially last Thursday, isn't it? You know, what if the world was created last Thursday? But in this scenario, I said, well, what if you're in a kind of a matrix and you've been programmed and you've just come online 5 minutes ago, and all of the beliefs and thoughts that you apparently have don't actually relate to anything in the external world. They are just been programmed into the programming. So when you kind of troll through your justifications for how you know things for absolute certainty, every time you pick up something that you think refers to this being outside of the simulation, you are just accessing a piece of the program. You're not actually, it isn't the case that there actually is necessarily anything beyond the simulation which gets you to absolute certainty. And now that's the scenario. How do you tell that you aren't actually in that simulation? How do you actually know that you do exist and that there is an external world and that God exists and that you can know things for absolute certainty? So any answer he gives, we could reasonably say that is the exact same answer that the simulated Arcane could produce. There is no way of differentiating from the simulation and reality, if indeed there is any reality. So he can make all the appeals he wants that, well, if God existed, then maybe, so if God existed, then that would be sufficient to justify his position. Well, if the external world actually does exist, then that is sufficient for me to justify my belief in its existence. And, so we're both in the same position in that sense. But the problem is, how do you actually go about verifying that and proving that to be absolutely correct? And the references, I mean, it's like saying that, your house has been repossessed, but you'll say, oh, it's fine, I'll get it back because I'm going to win the lottery. Well, if you win the lottery, then yeah, sure, you'll have enough money to get your house back. But the problem is, will you actually win the lottery? I mean, you can't be certain that that's going to happen. And that's the same problem. There's no way of reducing doubt in that situation to absolutely zero, where he can be certain that he isn't in the simulation and that he is the person he thinks he is, and that all of his beliefs are actually true. And so, it's just a very obvious and quite crude way of showing someone how they're full of shit, because, he isn't in any better position than the rest of us. He doesn't have direct access to God. And even if he did, he wouldn't know that direct access isn't a part of a simulation. There isn't any way to get around that problem. So skepticism stands for the presuppositionalist just as it does for anybody else. I mean, some more sophisticated types of presup might be able to do a little bit of fancy footwork to try to get away from that. I'm not sure how exactly they would, but in this raw, basic, primitive, like Sci-10-Bruggenkate form of presuppositionalism, there isn't actually any way out of that problem. So the irony is they often try to invoke, well, you could be a brain in a vat, you could be in the Matrix. Well, so could you, and that's so we either park that over there and then have a different talk about knowledge and all of this, and at the same time you have to actually drop this claim that you are actually getting out of it because you're not. And right. And that was basically what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, that pretty much encompassed. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I completely agree with that. One thing that I think of anytime I am mulling this presup argument in my head is, how does a Christian not? I mean, even if you don't go with the simulation, but just our own reality here, how do you know that God simply isn't lying to you? If he's all-powerful, you're just making an assumption that he isn't lying to you. And even if you make the claim that, well, God isn't capable of lying to you, how do you know that? I mean, if
Yeah.
God is all-powerful, then he is capable of tricking you into thinking he isn't lying to you. I mean, the ultimate problem with our situation and knowledge is, like, even if there is a God and he is telling the truth and he's giving you that truth, is that we're fallible and we don't know. We aren't God. We don't have all of that knowledge. So even if God reveals it to us, we don't know for certain that he's revealing it to us truly.
How do you know I'm not God?
Yeah,
Well, I think that sorry, Potato, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I think that is the point. It's quite obvious, and I think Saiten Brewing Kit, I've heard him sidestep that before. Very unsatisfactory, in my opinion, where he says something along the lines of, "Well, is it absolutely impossible that God could exist, and then that God could make it possible that I would know with certainty that he existed?" To which the answer, any honest person would go, well, yeah, no, it doesn't. It's not absolutely impossible that God exists. Of course, I'm not saying that. And so, okay, so you grant me the possibility, and as if that small amount of possibility somehow links up and gets through the barrier of the skeptical scenario. I mean, it wouldn't, and it's just.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say the problem with that, and I can't believe how many people fall into the same freaking trap over and over again. And Trey does this ad nauseum. But when you post something like that and they respond with an open-ended question like, "Is it absolutely impossible?" I can't believe people actually answer that question when they should really just be, "No, motherfucker, address what I just said." Question. Sorry, that's my dog.
I thought it was you.
That's not Arcane Logos. No, I'm sorry. It was made too much sense.
But yeah, it's people. I don't understand how people can still, fall into that sort of trap. And then once you answer that question, like Fox said, Sai himself would just sit there and just go, "Well, you granted me that, even though that's not exactly what you did." They'll claim that you did, and then you're stuck in that for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, but it no way solves that particular formulation of that scenario. I mean, Sai sometimes goes, "Why is it atheists always start talking about pink unicorns or something?" As if by appealing to situations where actually we're just using a thought experiment to show your problem. He seems to think, well, then at some point, then we're being absurd. And I think Arcane goes down a similar line of like, whatever, brah, you're just bitching or moaning, and that, as if it's not a real, actual objection. I mean,
or if you propose a hypothetical and say, well, why couldn't it be another deity or something? Oh, you've become a theist now, have you? That whole
Or why isn't it Allah?
I mean, that is also a reductio, nothing else. It's just a way to show that it leads to a well, it's a reductio, yes.
Yes.
And valid. Another thing that kind of gets me is when you talk to a cyclone, and when you posit, let's say another god or whatever, that they'll say, "Oh, you're a theist," or they'll say, "Let's not talk about a position you don't hold. Let's not talk about what you don't believe, because then we can just talk about the moon is made of green cheese." That's how the line goes, right? The moon is made of green cheese, this and that. But they're constantly asking you to accept hypotheticals in the sense that, is it possible of this? You know what I mean? And well, I can't understand when someone says, "Well, let's talk about things I don't. That's sometimes things I don't believe in, so I can't grant you that question." Or it seems very one-sided.
Yeah, well, and that's a tactic that people don't often think of, but I think it can be a very successful tactic in as a counter-apologetic. As soon as they start saying, "Well, is it possible that you could be a brain in a vat?" You could start saying, "Oh, do you think that I'm a brain in a vat? Let's not talk about things that you don't think are true," right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I can't believe that people don't counter that, and they just fall right into this thought experiment about brains and vats, and they get stuck in this rabbit hole. And it's like, do you believe I'm a brain in the vat? No, I don't believe so either. Well, let's not talk about things we don't believe, right?
I think it speaks to kind of the honesty on one side and the dishonesty on the other side. When you have somebody who proposes a scenario, one side is willing to think about that and then judge their position on it and reevaluate, and think about it, and the other side just completely ignores it, skips over it. Let's get back to what I was talking about.
Right. Well, it's assuming that you are talking. If you're going to get into this conversation with somebody, let's say who's a pre-supper and who is not a dickhead, which I don't know of any, but yeah, you can go for the honesty thing and whatever. But these guys aren't there for that. They're there to try to trap you and make you look stupid. So I don't.
I agree. I think you're right that it maybe is a tactic we should use. But I think the reason that it works for the pre-suppers is because the atheists in general are trying to actually have a productive discussion. So that's why atheists tend to, quote-unquote, fall into that trap, is because they're willing to take on these thoughts and think about them and consider them. Whereas the pre-supper is certainly not willing to consider things that don't line up with their already existing viewpoints.
Oh, by the way, if anyone out there is doubting Arcane's honesty / comprehension, his response to Fox's question is, as I've told you before, that you have a straw man that you still have not corrected. God is absolute truth. God has revealed himself. And I read that and I started laughing. I won't go into his dribble. But Fox puts spectacular fail, where you in the simulation you no doubt assert the same thing, right? Which is kind of what he just went over. And then Arcane's response is, so not even God can let me know that? Logic fail. See, this is that switch up that question. Is it absolutely impossible for God? He's getting into that area. Arcane responds Fox responds with, that's nothing to do with logic. Would your sim counterpart not just say the exact same thing? How do you know you aren't your sim counterpart without appealing to the exact same justification for not being so that he'd use? I probably messed that up. Can you try answering the objection with more than just an assertion? So Arcane responds, can God let me know that he's not just a sim? And there it is again. He's stuck.
No.
He's stuck in the loop. See, he's stuck in the script right here, so he has to keep repeating that question. He didn't get the answer he wanted the first time, so he has to fucking repeat, right? So Fox gives a good answer. If he exists, he might. If he exists, but he might not. How do you know that you have an actual revelation, not just a sim programming that makes you think you do? Again, nothing to distinguish you from your counterpart. And then, of course, I chime in because I was at work. I made a little note about his previous comment about the word games. And I wrote right here when he says, God is absolute truth, God's revealed himself. I meant to quote him, but I said, holy shit, Arcane Logos destroys his own position in one post. But as we go through, see, every time he responds, I mean, how many times have, this is a long time, I won't go through it all, but all these little tidbits here are us trying to get him to actually answer the challenge. Am I mistaken here, Fox? I mean...
Yeah, it's just deflection. It's just risibles. I mean, I made a comment that he's trying to do what Trey does, which is, it is just dodge and dodge and dodge and dodge. I mean, they always try to, if they can, to have the last word, but eventually they will just allow it to peter out, and then they will forget everything you've said as if it never happened, and then the next day or a week later they'll just launch into the same nonsense, like Trey and his some of the stuff he's talked about, cause and effect and all that stuff. So again, it's just this, the blatant attempt to look like they're saying something intelligent when it's just the most visible stuff.
I have a question, if you guys don't mind. So there's this general assumption within this whole conversation that God is omniscient, and I would put forward that I don't think that omniscience is even possible. And let me kind of explain what I mean by this. And I don't know that I would bring this up if I was having a conversation with a theist, because it's too difficult, I think. But like, let's say that the room you're in is everything that exists anywhere, and you know every single atom, nook and cranny in that room. So you, in effect, actually do know everything. But I don't think it's possible that you could actually know for certain that you knew everything, because there would always be the possibility that, for instance, there's something just beyond the room that you don't know about, or there's another dimension that you don't know about. So
Yeah,
I don't think it's even possible to be omniscient, because you would, even if you did actually know everything in existence, you couldn't actually know that you knew everything in existence.
yeah, it's a good objection, and there are probably a few wheezy ways that apologists would get around it, but the standard obvious one would probably just be appeal to God's nature. Well, it is by nature, by definition, God is that being that is all knowing. You know, so it doesn't even. It's not as if God has to prove to Himself, or God in this scenario, God doesn't have to worry about those thoughts. He knows absolutely.
That's why I wouldn't necessarily try and bring it up, but just
Yeah.
as a thought experiment.
But it's good. It's like the definition of omnipotence, which is always 100 different ways to define what omnipotence is. I had this discussion with I don't remember who the theist was, but he was commenting on some sorts where they defined omnipotence as being able to do everything which is logically possible, which would then include, well, it's logically possible for me to lie. Well, God can't do that. Well, for God, that's just not logically possible.
Yeah,
No, it is logically possible. What would restrict God from doing that is God's nature. I mean, you could say appeal to His nature. So basically, God can do everything that His nature can do, which is something which is vastly powerful, but it's not omnipotent, because there is, within the set of logically possible things, there are things that God can't do. I mean, I could feasibly, logically, possibly create a stone so big that I couldn't lift it. Well, can God do that? Well, no. Well, that is logically possible. It's logically impossible for God because of the way you've got these unrestricted qualities, which don't seem to make much sense when you put them together.
I don't see how that is problematic for theists. I mean, what exactly is the problem? I mean, the only problem seems to be that only problem seems to be that God cannot fail. But how exactly that is a bad thing?
Well, it is. I mean, to go back to the definition that a lot of theists use, not all, obviously, but the idea that God can do everything which is logically possible seems to be that it makes sense that, well, if a being is omnipotent, then it can do everything that's logically possible. It can't do things that are illogical and impossible. So we can grant them that. So if that's the case, then God can do things that presumably I can do, because I can lie. It's logically possible for me to lie. And if it's logically possible for one being to lie, then it's logically possible for any being to lie, except if there is some other limit that prevents them from doing it. So it's not, for instance, it's logically possible for me to teleport myself to the top of Mount Everest. But my nature is such that it's physically impossible. It's not possible within the limits of what my nature is. But it's logically possible that I could wake up tomorrow and have this superpower that allows me to teleport myself around. So it's logically possible for God to be able to lie, but there's something of His nature that restricts Him in the same way that I'm restricted from teleporting to the top of Mount Everest. Which, I mean, you can say that's just the nature of God. But what that then does to the concept of omnipotence is it just renders it basically that God can do what God can do, and that's just what is within His nature to do.
I'm omnipotent too.
So am I.
I can do whatever.
I mean, obviously. Sorry.
No.
Go ahead.
So I heard this a long time ago. I don't remember where I heard it from, but two things. One, I'd like to say that the definition of God has changed since I've grown up, right? So when I was growing up, it was God can do anything, and nothing's impossible. And it says nothing's impossible with God or something like that in the Bible, right? Right, Gabby? Are you awake? But anyway,
yes, that's correct.
I saw you muted for a second. I didn't notice that. But anyway, so as I got older, that was the thing. God can do anything and everything. And as I got older, and as I've gotten into more classes and gotten to college and this and that, this definition has changed to it's really what's in God's nature. Well, it's really what's logically, and just they seem to be refining it over and over again to sort of cornhole it into a definition that makes sense.
It depends on who you're talking to, because I think there's a lot of Christians who would just flat out say God can do everything. But then if you get into kind of some of the conversation that we're having here, then it might alter. But if you're talking to kind of the more quote-unquote sophisticated Christians who have faced some of these arguments before, then you'll get kind of like what you're talking about, where it's a more tempered version of omnipotence.
Gotcha.
So logically possible.
So somebody posed a question that said, okay, you guys may have heard this, so humor me here. Is it logically possible for God to create a sword that can cut through anything?
Sure. Why not?
It sounds like it, yeah.
Is it logically possible for God to create a shield that an indestructible shield?
Captain America.
Is it logically possible for God to create those?
Yeah. It seems logically possible for both those things to happen.
Right, but is it logically possible for those to happen at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah, it would seem so. Yeah, it wouldn't be. I mean, you would have your shield and you'd have your sword, and then it wouldn't necessarily be the case that they have to. I mean, what would happen when they then interact is obviously that would be a problem. That would seem to be a bit of a paradox.
Right.
Which is why
he already did both, and they're called the Bible.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like, okay, this one isn't, A is logically possible, B is logically possible, but they're not logically possible at the same time.
Yeah, it's a problem, and I think some things would get around it and just say, okay, omnipotence is just a label we put on God's nature because God's nature is such that he has some remarkable abilities. There are things he can't do, but so what? He can't lie. That's a good thing. He can't do evil. That he's incapable of evil. That's another good thing. So God can do all these wonderful things.
Right. Well, yeah, all of the things that we would normally say were evil that he does are not evil either. So that's part of the.
Well, by definition, if God is the good, then everything God does is good.
Yeah.
So there's that problem as well. But I mean, I don't have as much a problem with when theists just say, well, when you talk about God, when you put the label of omnipotence on, it isn't the case that all these paradoxes and problems arise. There would be perhaps some limiter in there, but you're still talking about a vastly powerful and still unsurpassed supreme being, of which there isn't. It isn't possible that there is a being that could be. Or there isn't. It might be logically possible. But it isn't such that there is a being that can do any of the things that God can do, and some extra stuff on top. He's still top of the food chain, I guess. I don't have much of a problem with that. But you do think it's a classic example of sometimes trying to square bits of the Bible and make everything kind of fit in there and make sense. Like if it was up to me, if I was a theist, I'd drop the whole changeless changer thing because it's a bit dubious and they get into some really
incoherent.
Yeah, there are some incoherent stuff where you could drop that, but I mean some theists probably have some quite clever and esoteric responses to all of this. I'm not saying they don't, but it seems very ad hoc and kind of counterintuitive and barely coherent and buried amongst a lot of. It'd be good to hear what people like Maximus and stuff. They've probably down in the seminary there's probably a whole library of how to respond to this stuff. But
I think Maximus defines God as a being that is capable of actualizing all true propositions. I don't know if that is problematic, but
yeah, I mean that would be a more concise and clear way of putting it. But what's the true value of well, it seems to be possible. It seems to be possible without unless we're begging the question that a God can lie.
Yes,
I mean, it isn't a logical
contradiction. That doesn't make any sense to me, at least. Why cannot God lie? It is not contradictory in any sense, and well,
the reason he can't lie is because then that renders their whole belief system into a whole chaos. If God can't possibly lie, then oh boy, now what do we do with this whole Bible thing? So that's why he can't lie.
Yeah, it's quite problematic. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. No, it is because it makes God as being possibly this really mischievous bastard who can make out that he's this loving and all-powerful thing, but he's really just fucking with everybody. If by definition he could do that, then that is a possibility, you know, and you would never have any way of knowing until you actually met this being that it wasn't all just a big, you know, just a big laugh on his behalf. It was just a big joke. But if by definition he's incapable of doing any of that, no, that's just God couldn't do that. That's just not possible in his nature. Then you define that out of God, that possibility away, which is quite an uncomfortable consequence, as you say. So.
Yeah, I don't understand how they can have all these definitive answers to a God's nature, what he can do. They act like he's their fucking neighbor. Like they could just knock on his door, ask for some salt, figure it out. You know what I mean? Hey God, you gonna give me back that DVD, or you know what I mean? Like they just kind of just blanketly say things, and it's like it just puts me off my tee. I just kind of already are like.
That's because you don't have a relationship with him.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
Oh, that one as well. That was another one that I think Seamus got his knickers in a twist about that, because I asked about that. A relationship seems to me, by definition, should involve a relation with a being that you can confirm exists, I guess, or have some justification that you know that the possibility that it is just all in your head is less likely in relation to some method of justification than you know, it actually does exist. I mean, so you know, you have some evidence that suggests that actually I'm not just talking to myself. It isn't just an imaginary friend. So you know, which is fine, because some theists might say, well, yeah, I do. Look, I've got all of this evidence here, and this is, you know, someone like Matt Bell would try that. But Seamus because Seamus is notoriously flaky and rubbish in terms of his proofs that God exists. That he really had to struggle with that, because it sounds like everything you're saying to me could just be the wishful thinking and you know, cultural biases and all of that stuff, or you know, just whatever it is, that isn't that more likely. So how do you verify it? I mean, you know, I have a relationship with my girlfriend. I know she exists because she's sat in the other room and I can go talk to her. I mean, it is possible that, you know, I'm a brain in the vat and all that bullshit, but that's at least some justification. But how do I know that? How do you know that you're not actually like the person, you know, who has voices in their head, who thinks that, you know, some other kind of God speaking to them? Or, you know, how do you know that the Muslim or the Hindu, that their relationships are wrong but yours is right? That kind of, you know, that whole thing of personal relationship, again, is just, I tend to grant it just on the grounds of, I understand that you sincerely believe what you believe, and you know, you feel as if you're getting some kind of feedback, but actually, if we're being honest, there isn't a verifiable relationship there. So that isn't something that's going to book.
I was going to say, it always boils down to you want to believe what you want to believe because you want to believe it. That's pretty much the end all to me. But
yeah, and I have no problem with that.
Yeah, this was one of the points that I tried to drive home in that last faith Bible study session, was, you know, the idea that, and this was one of the things that they kind of had pressed over and over again. It's, you know, we've got this deep relationship with this deity, and I, in that last session, I said, well, look, you know, I know that I have a relationship with my wife, even if you know, all my senses went dead except for my ability to hear her, because I know that, you know, she's able to give me information that I don't possess myself. And, you know, I know that there are other people out there. Matt Dillahunty has said, you know, if I'm the only one, then, you know, I would have, you know, in response to the question of solipsism, I would be the one who is responsible for all of the great masterpieces and literature and paintings and, you know, all this art. I know that I'm not capable of doing that because I can't produce those things, you know, at will. I pressed to these guys in this Bible study, you know, do you have any examples of information that has ever come from, you know, your quote-unquote relationship with this omniscient deity that you didn't possess yourself, you know, in your own mind? And I've yet to have any believer of any religious tradition return an answer that indicated anything like that. So
yeah, so what it amounts to me because I have a friend that does a Bible study, and the way he describes it to me is a bunch of people that are convinced that a personal experience, was a result of their relationship with the God, and they sit around and they talk about it, and they kind of reassure themselves.
Yeah, I mean, they define. That's the way it is. They define this experience as a relationship, even though it has none of the hallmarks of any other relationship, even like a pet. I have 2 cats, and I have a relationship with those cats. One is a better relationship than the other, but I have a relationship, and I interact with them, and the Christians just define their going to church and their internal emotions as a relationship with God, and so then they just perpetuate this idea with other Christians, and it becomes this feedback loop.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, I think, I don't know. We've kind of touched upon, I think, everything. We even hit a little Trey, although, did anyone see, that's a terrible segue, I know, but I think we're coming up on the last few minutes here. Did anybody see Jim Gardner's Trey Jadlow video?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Absolute genius.
Have you guys seen it?
I missed that one.
Potato. Yeah, okay.
Nope.
It's pretty damn funny.
When this happened?
Yeah.
Is this latest hangout or?
No, it's like a SoundCloud clip, basically, of it's a take up of Trey's, babbling nonsense, and it's like an infomercial, I guess, or something like that, where Trey's trying to sell this product, which is, I can't remember the actual gobbledygook.
It's Trey Jadlow's Contingent Transcendent Non-Linear Self-Evident Book of Dental Hygiene.
It's just, yeah. And the brilliant thing about it was that when Jim put it out there, and then Trey came into the comments, and it was just classic Trey, no awareness of what was the point of the whole thing, really. It was just to highlight how just so nonsensical the guy is and how much bullshit he produces. He just classically just started going into traditional Trey Jadlow mode, and it was just like, I commented and saying, it's just so usual of Trey to come into a comment thread of people of an actual piss taker, send up of him, and for him to just be as he is, portrayed pretty much in the clip. It's just like, the guy is just he's just a walking parody. He's just like, yeah. But it was really funny. I'd definitely say check it out. Anyone hasn't seen it.
I know from speaking to Matt Steele that he really, really, really doesn't like Trey Jadlow. I mean, just not on YouTube. Just doesn't like the guy. And it came through. I'm surprised he actually responded, because he generally doesn't even respond anymore. But much to Trey's fashion, and much as it's typical of fashion for Trey, it's a bit. No one's giving him the time of day. He's essentially challenging J.D. Kane over and over again to a hangout, and Matt Steele and I cracking jokes and pointing out how dumb he is. And but I made the point. I said Trey Jadlow asserts a bunch of things and then takes the stance that you're wrong because he's right. Since he dismisses all scrutiny, critique, objections to his position, how can he claim no one has ever rebutted his argument?
It's just laughable, isn't it? That entire claim. I mean, pretty much. I mean, I was being generous, and I said maybe 95% of the people who have ever commented on the hangout or video that Trey's been in have just said, "What the fuck is this guy going on about? He's just terrible. His arguments are bad." There are theists who cringe when he starts talking, he just doesn't understand it. He doesn't see it, and I've tried to point it out to him. I've actually tried quite nicely to point it out to him, because I think there's something quite sad about Trey in some respects, and I mean that sincerely. He does seem to want to have contact with people, but he doesn't want to do it in a way where he might actually have to listen and accept that he doesn't know everything and that he makes mistakes, and that maybe there are other ways to argue for God, that he could sit in and listen to people who actually serious about this stuff and who has done the work. He hasn't done any of the work. He doesn't intend to do any of the work. He thinks he's got all the answers because he listened to R.C. Sproul for half an hour or whatever it was. And it's just like, I mean, I've tried this for it. I mean, there was a particular point he kept making about how the law of non-contradiction was, the cause and effect was basically an extension of the law of non-contradiction. And I went into the comments and I tried to point out why I think he was getting muddled about it and why I think it was wrong. He didn't respond to that. He just ignored that. And then in another thread, I tried to say to him, well, look, Trey, why didn't you look at this? Why didn't you respond to this? Why didn't you try to see if you can come up with an answer to it? And he was like, oh, well, you know, and maybe we should do a hangout or something like that. So I said, okay, I'm willing to do a hangout about this and talk to you about it. And then there was back and forth. And then it was, he said, oh, so what's the hangout going to be about? And I was like, Trey, do you not know what I've linked? And then I linked to it again, and it was just like this. Oh, okay. Well, I thought we were talking about something else, like meta-narrative or whatever the other nonsense he's on about. And it was just like, I'm not going to have a hangout with you if you don't even do me the courtesy of responding to what I've said. And actually, you know, I went to the trouble of writing that out and to try to build some kind of a dialogue with the guy. And no, he wasn't. But he wanted to hang out still. He wanted to go through the nonsense that he, you know, whatever the latest buzzwords he's learned. And it's just so disingenuous. And the arrogance there, it just stifles him and it prevents him from actually being a decent enough guy to listen to. Because he's not a monster. He's you know, he's. I mean, I heard that.
We don't know that technically.
Well, he might be a monster. I don't know. I will mock him relentlessly because that's just, you know, that's part and parcel of the thing. And Frey says he even likes that, but you know, it is just, yeah, it's just.
Do you ever think like he does all the hangouts from that awful like dentist office because like his wife at home is just like, nah, just put that shit away, like that?
I think he's divorced.
Oh, is he really? I didn't know
so.
That. Imagine that. The other thing that really just cues me into how dishonest this guy is, and I know we use disingenuous and dishonest because, you know, we generally try to take, I think, the higher road, and we use the term dickhead several times today for Arcane, but it's funny, Jim Gardner says, I mean this in no small way, Trey. You're an actual fucking dickhead. And the one thing that strikes me as dishonest with this guy is he was in a hangout. I forget who it was with. I think it was maybe, I don't know if it was Hogtie or not, but
Fixer.
He does this thing where right when you corner him, he goes, yeah, look, I gotta go right now. Maybe we can do this again sometime. This was really great. Like, just boom, like, just cuts the conversation down. Like, I don't know, does he do it on his lunch break? Like, what's his deal with, whenever the conversation gets really good, whenever he starts to get beat up a little bit or no one's letting him out of the corner, he just like, yeah, I gotta go.
Lets himself out of the corner.
What's that?
He said lets himself out of the corner.
Yeah, really. So, I don't know.
I do wonder with Trey if he actually is stuck inside a tooth. If he's a very, very small man stuck inside a tooth, that's somehow got Wi-Fi reception. Because that room is just like this, it's like this perfectly white, like enamelled room, and he's in there making teeth. And I just wonder if he's trapped in there. And really, if we decipher all of his nonsense, you know, it's like the Da Vinci Code. There'll be some way of communicating that, you know, he's stuck inside the tooth of a giant.
Like he's some sort of dental fucking Keebler elf.
that at this point is the only sense that it makes. But I mean, the guy again. Yeah, I mean, I can't make myself strongly dislike the guy. There are times when he really pisses me off, and he tries to push my buttons. He tries to make a lot of, oh, well, you know, you don't know anything, and you're such a punk on all things philosophical. I was like, well, you know, what school did you go to again? Oh, I didn't go to any school. I'm a layman. I'm an idiot. I'm an illiterate goat-herder, which is, you know, I was trying to like use that as an example of, well, you know, I don't care if you are one of those people. No, I am one of those. Like, you know, as if you know, he's just this. He even admits he's a self-confessed layman, and he you know, these issues are really complicated, and I mean, someone like Maximus Confessus does a pretty good job of arguing from contingency in a way that Trey would never, if in a million years, be able to do. So we can, you know, I've not spoken to Maximus about that, but you know, back and forth in comments and stuff, it it's clear that he's done the work. He knows what he's talking about. I ultimately think it's a flawed position. I even said this to Trey. I said, "Oh, there are better forms of your argument out there." As in, like, hint, hint, go and read a fucking book, and you might actually do a better job of this. But he's sticking to his guns. He thinks R.C. Sproul is the greatest thinker of our age.
He's
because
very defensive. I made one comment.
Oh, yeah, don't do that. Does not like that.
Is that guy still alive, R.C. Sproul, or no?
Yeah, I think he is. I don't know that he's active anymore.
Yeah, he, if Trey wants to really, mimic R.C. Sproul, or at least get that guy's point across or whatever, my advice to Trey is to take your mouth off his balls and actually read some more books. Different books, not R.C. Sproul books. So... anyways, I think we've reached our upper time limit here. No, I'm not going to do a rap to wrap up the show because I'm horrible at that sort of thing, and I believe I have no discernible artistic talent. So,
then why did I even bother coming today?
Well, anyone got any last words? If not, I'm just going to close it out. Our next show is June 7th. Go out. We should go out and cause some problems and get involved in more stuff, and so we have stuff to bullshit about in 2 weeks. That's my plan. Get involved. But you guys got anything else going on?
No plans.
That was going to you guys. That's the only other guys in the room here.
No, I don't.
All right. Well, we'll think of something, and we'll see you all June 7th. Have a good one.